establishment intelligence, you'd come to intimidate me. Everybody, George Little, he's a spokesman for the CIA, Pentagon. You're not going to intimidate me. Okay. Maybe him.
Why is he sitting right in front of me?
I know, yeah.
You know, that's a little weird.
Oh, Congressman, it's great to be with you again. This is I walked in and I was talking to Gus from Accenture this morning, saying, I'm fairly depressed about this topic in the sense that in the many years that I've had the privilege of interviewing you or talking about the cyber health of the country and what's going on, you just read every day another shocking revelation. The North Koreans just sold the war plans from the US government and the South Korean government about what we might do. The Securities and Exchange Commission hacked, doesn't tell anybody for 2 years. There's a lot, Equifax, there's a lot of things going on. And I'm just interested in, you're the cyber guy, the cyber diva in Congress.
I don't know how I feel about that title. But,
in my world, it's a compliment. But I would tell you that I want to just get a sense from you because you're trying to fix things.
Sure.
And you have a lot of Republican colleagues and Democratic colleagues. And I just wonder, what is your own assessment when you get up every morning and saying, crap, another big company went down or the US government got hacked?
So I'm hopeful that we can get it right because most of these major attacks are not zero-day exploits. Zero-day exploit being something that's previously unknown. So it's not like these are incredibly sophisticated attacks. It is people, the defenders, not doing basic stuff that is good when it comes to digital system hygiene. So if you patch your software, if you have strong passwords, if you make sure that folks don't have that people's permissions to data is right, you can defend against 85% of the kind of attacks that are happening. And so, but that's why it also makes this issue so frustrating, is because if you do the basics, you should be defending your digital infrastructure. And because we're not doing the basics, that's why we have the OPM hack. That's why we have Equifax as a problem. And so that's how I would look at the state of this.
So we're 17 years into the 21st century. And I remember year 2000, Andy Grove, the former chairman and CEO of Intel, was lobbying Congress about the concerns about Y2K and about the vulnerabilities we had there. It seemed like we met that challenge and then have gone to sleep for 15 years. Tom Udall just gushed praise on you. This is a Democratic senator gushing praise on you and what you did with modernizing government, getting more resources and awareness. Why is the system so slow? Why has it taken 17 years for Will Hurd to come in and say we need to modernize our government systems and be smarter on IT? Just what's going on?
Well, I think there needs to be an improved common body of knowledge, not only in Congress, but in the executive branch as well, recognizing and understanding the threats. And
tell me what that means, an improved body of knowledge. I don't get it.
Look, many of my colleagues think the dark web is direct messaging within Twitter, right?
Or WhatsApp.
Right. Yeah. Right. So it's some basic things like that we need to improve. We need to make sure that agency heads are responsible for cybersecurity. We're seeing that trend change in the private sector, where this is no longer just seen as a cost center, cybersecurity that is. It is something that's invaluable to the basic operations of a company. And that's why you have CIOs and CISOs report directly to CEOs, or they're considered to be part of the C-suite. We need to have that same kind of mentality and culture here in the government. There's still, I believe, 14 of the, there's 24 CFO agencies. These are the big agencies in the federal government. I think 14 still have a CIO that doesn't report to the deputy agency head or the agency head. And so you have to make sure that culture is there. And what I've tried to do is just be persistent, continue to shine a light on the problem, bring people back in over and over and make them answer these questions.
I know you've been thinking a lot about personnel. If I were a graduate of MIT today in some very sophisticated stuff in the IT world, and I had a couple of piercings and tattoos and just stayed up all night, slept during the day, wore a lot of black. you know, if I get offered a fortune to go work for Intel and I can be who I am versus going to work for the US government, that represents a fork in the road. And what I think you've been worried about, the absence of really competent talent going into the US government and being drawn in the private sector. So where does my creative, MIT, you know, digital horizon go, and how do you deal with that?
Look, we need that person to continue to going in industry. We need that person to be a white hat hacker. We need, you know, that community is important to our digital ecosystem. But what the government needs to accept is that we're never going to compete with the private sector for jobs. And that's okay, but how can we compete? And the concept and what I'm working on is this thing called the Cyber National Guard.
Right.
If you're a kid and you want to go...
Is that hashtag Cyber National Guard?
Hashtag Cyber National Guard. You heard it here first. It is, if you're in high school and you want to go to college in something around cybersecurity, we're going to find you some scholarships, some federal dollars to do that. And it may not even be a 4-year program, but you're going to get federal dollars, and then for however long you got scholarship money, you have to serve in the federal government for that length of time. So you're not going to go work at the NSA or the CIA or DOD. You're going to go work in the Department of Interior. You're going to go work in the U.S. Census Bureau. You're going to work in Department of Homeland Security, other places where we need folks that have these talents. And then after you've served and you go work in the private sector, that private sector company is going to loan you back into the federal government for, let's call it, 10 days every other quarter. And so you achieve cross-pollination of ideas.
And what do I get out of that?
You being?
The National Guardsman.
Well, the National Guardsman is you are exposed. The networks are so big in the government. There's no other place where you can get that kind of exposure, and so you get a skill set that is important when you go to the private sector, and also you're getting school paid for, right? And so that's the value. And then when you go and work in that company, the company is going to appreciate this because they're getting an insight into what's happening in the federal government. The federal government is benefiting from having someone that has exposure in the private sector, and that's where we're going to start making sure that the private sector and the public sector are working a little bit closer together. And you know, we have the U.S. Digital Service,
right?
And these are for high-speed, low-drag folks that are going to come work for the government for 2 years. Okay. Why not have a second section which manages this Cyber National Guard, where if I'm a guardsman, let's say I'm going to be employed in the USDS for 4 years, but really I'm getting loaned back for 20 days a year.
Is this proposal legislation yet?
We are working on the text as we speak.
Who is your Democratic partner?
There's plenty of folks that want to
put a wanted sign out there, help wanted.
Yeah, we haven't established that, but look, there are plenty of people that I work with a lot on the Democratic side when it comes to these types of issues. But we want to make sure we start getting some actual text down so everybody knows exactly what we're trying to achieve.
Will, you were a spy.
I was. Spy master, technically.
You were a spy master. Yeah, you were a spy. I mean, you were literally, I mean, I'm not even joking. You were generally a spy, and that's maybe why George Little is here.
Yeah, I know.
Worked for the CIA.
That's why I'm not looking at
him. And worked for the CIA. You did covert. And I have not read David Ignatius's new novel, A Quantum Spy. It just arrived there. But I did read over the weekend John le Carré's book, A Legacy of Spies. I don't know if anybody read le Carré's latest book. Yeah, I happen to love it. But how much digital stuff was in that book? Almost nothing. So it gave me a snapshot of what old spycraft was like. You know, it was drop boxes. It was the way, I mean, it took you back into George Smiley days that I thought, wow, that preceded the age and the ecosystem we're in now. Ignatius is interesting in the stuff that he writes in the novels because he's looking at financial intelligence and how you target people and drones and sensors and hacking cars, and I don't know what quantum spy is, but you were a spy, and I just want to know how good or bad are our intelligence capabilities when you look at what's happening in the world, what other governments are doing.
So our intelligence capabilities are still the best in the world, right?
On what basis?
We can improve. It's because of the talented individuals. And let's use 9/11 as an example.
Yeah.
The day I drove my Toyota 4Runner from San Antonio, Texas to Washington, D.C. was the day of the USS Cole. That was the U.S. destroyer in the Gulf of Aden off the coast of Yemen that was bombed by Al-Qaeda. I was in the CIA when 9/11 happened. On September 12th, I was like the 4th or 5th employee in CTCSO, the Counterterrorism Center Special Operations Division, which prosecuted the war in Afghanistan. If you would have asked me then, would it be 16 years before another major attack on the homeland, I'd said, you're crazy. Something's going to happen, right? And the fact that we haven't had an attack like that in 16 years is a testament to the men and women in the intelligence services, our diplomatic corps, that are working hard every single day, doing really hard things. When you're in the CIA, and you get tasked with, hey, you got to stop this, you don't say, hey, boss, we don't have enough, our budget's not big enough, or we don't have enough people. You go do the job, all right? And that's that can-do attitude that persists. So our intelligence services have to be right every single time. Bad guys have to be right once. But where we can improve, especially in the digital world, our banks have a better idea of where Russian malware is going to come and attack them next, okay? Because they deal with this millions of attacks per month. So
do you think Russia is a serious threat to the United States?
100% it is. 100% it is. They are our adversary, not our ally. And so let's take what these assumptions our banks have, turn those into collection priorities. Okay? Task our core collectors, people that did the job that I used to do, and go collect that information, and then get it back in the hands of our friends in the private sector so that they can defend against that next level attack. So we shouldn't have any hubris within the federal government, within our collectors saying we know everything. I speak at as many high schools as I can. I always tell the kids, I know what I know what I don't know, but what I don't know is the largest of those three categories. And in the NSA, in the CIA, in DOD, we have to accept that there's a lot out there that we don't know, and we should be leveraging the talent out in the private sector to help us fill those gaps. And so turning private sector assumptions into collection requirements, it's not hard. Tasking core collectors, it's fairly easy. But getting that information back in the hands, that is the difficult problem, and that's what some programs are trying to do, and that's something that I'm interested in working on as well.
You have been pretty critical of the Obama administration for having essentially created silos that made it hard for this kind of information awareness to be communicated, particularly overseas with export control issues. I'd love to just get a chance to understand whether any of that has been fixed in this new administration.
So has some of that been fixed? No. And I would say Tony Scott,
maybe you can explain to the audience better than I can what your objection was.
Well, so it is, there was a number of issues, but first and foremost, I still believe, and just my criticism of the previous administration was not a partisan thing, because I do believe one of the last few issues in Washington, D.C. that is truly bipartisan is cybersecurity. And so we have to, a big issue was this thing called Wassenaar. This was other countries saying that anything that can be used in a cyber world that a bad guy can use should be considered under export controls. And so that meant that if Accenture was doing a technical vulnerability assessment of an entity in Italy, and the things they learned, they emailed to their office back here in Washington, D.C., they would have violated an export control, right? That's crazy. Now, I would say this process worked because this was a multilateral forum overseas, and the State Department came back and said, this is what we're going to implement. Commerce was the implementing agency. They sent out, a summary of what's going to happen. The entire security community, reacted. Congress, we did hearings on this, and Commerce said, hey, we need to pump the brakes on this and go back to Wassenaar and renegotiate. So we're still currently in that renegotiation to fix that. But I think this was an example where the entire process worked to make sure that the input from the private sector was used to fix some official position. And this is where I think a lot of these international issues need to be faced. Now I also have a problem with many of our European allies that they try to use the specter of Snowden, saying that the U.S. doesn't appreciate privacy, when that's a fallacy, because Germany, who is also one of the biggest countries criticizing the United States, the government owns like a third of the telecommunications infrastructure. The BND, their local service, can do things against German citizens in Germany that the NSA and the FBI would never have dreamed about doing. And so there's a disconnect there with many of our allies.
One of the questions we were just talking about is, we read a lot about what the Chinese are doing to penetrate systems, OPM, various companies, corporate espionage, what the Russians are doing in hacking. And I'm just interested, is the United States doing any of this?
Ask him. Now, look, I
know we did Stuxnet, but Stuxnet seems so small and trivial now when we look at the scale of what other state players are doing in the cyberspace. So we know about Stuxnet. We know that Israel and the United States engage in this. We don't know a lot, and I guess I know you know the secrets, and I just want to know whether we should feel confident or we should feel like we're pathetic.
So the United States still has, when you look at capabilities, and you compare this against other advanced persistent threats, that's the term of the baddest of the bad. We're in that top tier, period, end of story. Are we using the capabilities that we have enough, is I think the better question. And my answer would be no. And let's take Eastern Ukraine as the example. The Russians are using the latest and greatest tactic, techniques, and procedures in electronic warfare in Eastern Ukraine. Are we utilizing the latest and greatest in counter electronic warfare in Eastern Ukraine to stop to protect our ally, Ukraine, and to counter the Russian aggression? The answer is no. And so who is the equivalent of the Navy SEALs when it comes to electronic warfare? And if somebody knows the answer, I'm still trying to figure that out.
Cool. You can see him right after.
Yeah.
Quantum computing.
Yes.
You've regularly said that we're not doing enough in this space. It's a blind spot. We need to devote more resources to quantum computing. I want to know why, and I want to know who's blocking you.
Yeah. So Vladimir Putin, a couple weeks ago, said that whoever masters AI is going to
run the world.
He's wrong. It's whoever masters quantum computing is going to be the sole hegemon. And quantum computing is important because it completely negates how we do encryption right now. And so that means the digital tools and tactics we've been using to protect information for 50 years is going to be negated. And that means if you have, let's say the Russians or the Chinese, has sucked in all this data that's encrypted, you can't read it right now. Whoever gets quantum computing is going to be able to break that and read that information. So whoever gets there first is going to have a significant leg up.
So who's your opponent politically on this?
Well, there's nobody politically against doing more when it comes to quantum computing, making sure we have the federal funds for basic research that supports this, and making sure that we're working with industry. There's folks in Silicon Valley that are working on this, folks here in Washington, D.C. that are working on. Many of our allies, the Canadians in the Waterloo region, are very involved in looking at quantum computing. But we have to make sure we're focused on this. And it's hard look, I still think that, to me, and I have a higher than average, better understanding of this. To me, quantum computing is still a philosophical exercise, right? Because a bit can be a 1, a 0, both, neither, or all 4, all at the same time. Like that's a concept that's really hard. Thanks for the couple of engineers that giggled. It's a tough concept because it's so different than what we've always known. A bit can be 1 or 0. It's on or off, right?
In the aggregate, on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very literate, what is the digital literacy of your colleagues, the cyber literacy of your colleagues?
4?
Yeah,
4. No, but let me say this. Let me say this though. They understand the threat. They understand that this is a problem and something needs to be done, right? And so the recognition that there is a problem is 9. What we do about it and how we solve it, that's a lot lower. And being able to evaluate many of the different issues is difficult. Because look, there's still some basic questions that we haven't answered. What is a digital act of war and what's an appropriate response? Different parts of the federal government has opinions,
right,
but there's not something that we have agreed to. And so if you can't, if I believe there should be some red lines saying if X is done, Y is going to be a response.
So before I go to the audience, last question, since you mentioned active war. Do you share Bob Corker's concerns that the president's lack of temperament or his behavior is tilting us towards World War III?
I think the national security team that we have is one of the first rate. The fact that, what I find funny is...
But the team is different than the president.
Well, but the president's the person that selected the team,
right?
And so the fact that we're in direct negotiations with the North Koreans is a 12th or 13th story is crazy. If this would have happened 9 years ago or 10 years ago, people would be like, oh my God, I can't believe we're having direct conversations with the North Koreans. Why is it not within the 6-party talks framework? So as long as there's dialogue between us and the North Koreans, I don't think you're gonna have World War III. And one of the things I learned when I was in the CIA, be tough with tough guys and nice with nice guys. And so we have to be tough with the North Koreans.
Thank you. Let me open up the floor. Yes, right here. Good morning.
Good morning. I believe it was 2 nights ago that Rod Rosenstein tried to rebrand encryption backdoors as responsible encryption. I'm wondering if that the rebranding has swayed your opinion
How do
any.
you feel about the moniker responsible encryption?
No, look, it's real simple. Encryption is good for our national security. It's good for our economy. We should be strengthening encryption, not weakening it. And it's technically impossible to have strong encryption with any kind of backdoor in it. And so this is a conversation that we're going to be involved in forever. I don't know what crypto war we're in right now, right? Is it 5? Is it 6? You know, but this is an issue that is going to be going on for a long time. And for me and many of our colleagues, you can protect our digital infrastructure, chase bad guys, and protect our civil liberties all at the same time. It's hard, but we can do it. And our civil liberties are not burdens. They're the things that make our country great. And so yeah, you can call it whatever you want, but make sure you have strong encryption, period, in the story.
Yes, right up here in front. He's going to hold the mic for you.
Hi, my name is Tika McCullough. I was wondering if you could give your thoughts on cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin and the regulation of things like that.
Well, look, I look more at blockchain than I do cryptocurrency, right? And so I think blockchain.
Are they different?
They are different. So blockchain was ultimately the technology that allowed the kind of cryptocurrency to happen. But
don't you need Bitcoin or something like that to create the backbone to reward
you're not rewarding. A blockchain is just a distributed ledger, right?
Yeah.
That you can see any kind of changes, and not one person holds it, and so you can use it in customs, right? Merck's and IBM and DHS is working on a way on how you can use a blockchain to move products across the world. Walmart is using it to make sure they know where their cantaloupes have been. So if there's a listeria or some other issue, they can look immediately, this was in this facility, anything that went through this, let's find it. And so I've been focusing on blockchain as a tool that the federal government can be using in order to streamline processes. When it comes, I don't think we're going to get to a point where cryptocurrencies is the currency of the world. But I'm not knowledgeable enough about the nuance. All I do know is folks that have cryptocurrency, they've been targets of a lot of interesting attacks. One of the things I never learned is make sure you call your cell phone and make sure that you can't port your number to another cell phone, because hackers have been taking advantage of two-factor authentication in order to steal Bitcoin and things like that. So it has introduced a different type of attack on individuals that have this. So, but yeah, I think a lot of folks are still talking about this.
I just want to say the Atlantic loves having conversations with you. We cover so much territory. We've run out of, we're going to end right now, but one of the things that we didn't get to, but I hope we can next time is the distinction between dumb walls and smart walls, and how the kind of technology, sensors, whatnot, creates the kind of conditions you want, because I know you're not supportive of dumb walls, right?
Yes, I like that.
Yes,
that is. I concur with the good gentleman from the Atlantic. Look, building a 30-foot high concrete structure from sea to shining sea is the most expensive and least effective way to do border security. And the reason we haven't been able to get operational control of our border in 2017 is we haven't looked at all 2,000 miles of our southern border at the same time. And the only way we do that is with technology. It's a fraction of the cost. We can do implementation, and all the data we get, we can beam it to the men and women that are keeping us safe. So,
ladies and gentlemen, Congressman Will Hurd of Texas, thank you so much.